What's going on, everybody? We're back. It's the Sooners Illustrated podcast, episode 39 on this Monday, December the 4th, 2023. Josh Callaway, James D. Jackson, Tom Green. The transfer portal is open. Chaos across college football today. Guys all over the place are hopping in the portal. Some big names from OU are in the portal. Obviously, we're going to touch on that in just a second. Also, the NY6 has been announced. Oklahoma got left out. We'll talk about that a little bit as well as we move into December and silly season is upon us. But obviously, guys, we got to start with the transfer portal and the biggest bombshell of the day, really maybe in college football period, but certainly in these here parts. Dillon Gabriel's in the portal. So Oklahoma City caller for the last 2 years, came over from UCF, was briefly at UCLA, was committed to UCLA for a second there, made the big flip to OU, has been the quarterback of the Brent Venables era, sans one game, the Texas game last year when he was banged up and injured. He's in the portal. He's moving on. He won't be at Oklahoma for the bowl game or obviously next season, which that part was expected. Maybe the path that we're taking to get there, not quite as expected. Guys, just initial reaction right at the top. Gabriel in the portal. We'll see where he winds up. But obviously, news that was, not completely unexpected, but it's still a little jarring to see it. And he's going to be playing college football somewhere else next year. Will be kind of weird to see, honestly.
Yeah, like you said, not really a surprise.
Right.
Even though the last couple of weeks, everybody kind of danced around what his future was going to look like. But I think most expected that he would either declare for the NFL draft or more likely go into the transfer portal, because in just the state of college football right now, with the transfer portal, with NIL, when you have a experienced quarterback who has the kind of production that Dillon Gabriel has, like proven commodity, he can make bank his next year, wherever he ends up. Like he is going to be set. He's going to be better off going to wherever that may be. And I'm sure we'll discuss some possibilities here in a moment, but he'll be better off going there and just securing that NIL bag for a year. And not just that, but if he finds the right spot, he could have a chance to, carve out his name as the most prolific passer in NCAA history. He's already in the top 10. He's got a bit of a climb to do to surpass Case Keenum there at number 1. I think he needs like 4,200 yards, which would be a career year wherever he ends up. Right. But in the right offense, that's possible. Like, we'll see where he ends up. But I think it's a win-win scenario for Dillon, for Oklahoma. He said it himself after that TCU game. Oklahoma and him, they kind of needed each other, and they found each other at this interesting crossroads, because for him, it was when he was leaving UCF after getting banged up his third year there. Oklahoma, obviously a transitional period when he came in. Lincoln Riley was gone, took Caleb Williams with him. Oklahoma needed a quarterback. He had familiarity in Jeff Levy's system. It was just a marriage of circumstance, convenience, whatever you want to call it, but it worked out for the better for both of them, and Dillon kind of bridged this gap from one period of Oklahoma football into this next period as they move to the SEC.
Yeah, I know, and as Tom said, and I've been saying this for quite some time, especially when Dillon Gabriel was getting some flack from people around just about how he was performing early on in the season last year, things like that. It's like, this guy, he pretty much saved what Oklahoma had, during the transition time. He saved their transition. They really needed him. If they didn't have him, you saw how it was in the rival rivalry last year before when he was out. It could have been like that the whole season without a quarterback. That's the position OU was in. It was just like, it was going to be tough. It was going to be tough. And so having him come in and then having this year where they win 10 games and beat Texas and they get to a bowl game, even though it's not the one they wanted to get to. That's huge for Brent Venables, especially as they transition into the SEC. You got to think about he's proven that he can have a good quarterback and proven that he can win with a guy that's able to have those skill sets. So that shows a lot of other guys. That's possibly why Jackson Arnold is staying as well. Staying alongside Oklahoma. We talked to Kevin Sperry after his win in the state championship last week. He talked about it as well, why he wants to stay. So there's reasons there. It shows that OU can win with a good quarterback, and that's really good for them. So that's been perfect.
Yeah, like Tom said, 2 years ago, Dillon Gabriel needed Oklahoma. Oklahoma needed him. They don't need each other anymore, to put it kind of somewhat bluntly. He's got another year of college football to use. He's going to get paid, like Tom said. Some of these teams chasing him, and like he said, we're going to probably speculate a little bit on some possible landing spots. He's going to get a bag drop somewhere. Oklahoma's got their guy for the future, Jackson Arnold, sitting there ready to go. This was always going to be Jackson Arnold's team next season. Always. Going back to August, Brent Venables just kind of said offhandedly, one more year with Dillon. This was always the plan. That's why whenever people have asked me or you guys or anybody who covers this team, what if Dillon Gabriel comes back next year? That was never – I refuse to even entertain that because that was never going to happen. And so it makes sense for all parties involved. We'll see where Gabriel ends up. And now you look forward to a full month of it being Jackson Arnold's team to get ready for the Alamo Bowl, which we'll talk about more later. It works out for all involved. It just makes a ton of sense. And the way that Gabriel talked after that TCU game, obviously we still had a chance at a Big 12 championship game at that point, but you kind of just felt the finality of all of it. Like, there's nothing left to do here. We've all had a good run. And I'm fascinated to see how Gabriel's legacy and how his time here is viewed down the road. I think it'll get better as time goes on, honestly. Even though he didn't do anything overly noteworthy, obviously he wasn't a Heisman or anything like that. He's not going to get drafted real high. He didn't even win the Big 12, which is obviously kind of a standard Oklahoma. But like you guys have said, he came at a crucial time for Oklahoma. They had no QBs on the roster. He took a leap of faith to come here 2 years ago. He did play really well for stretches. He'll always have that Texas game, that drive that nobody's ever going to forget, the touchdown pass to Nick Anderson to win the game. So he has his place etched out. Is he going to be remembered as an all-time quarterback? Is he going to have a statue here? No, obviously. But he had a good run, and I think Oklahoma fans will remember him fondly as years go on. And so that'll be interesting to see now where he winds up, obviously, and where he's playing football next season. But, guys, talk about the value, I guess, in the fact that it's Jackson Arnold's team now moving into the bowl season, and obviously what's the right word? A confirmation that it's his team and his guy moving forward. We've talked a lot about Jackson Arnold being the guy. Well, he's really the guy now because Dillon Gabriel's in the portal. He's gone. Jackson Arnold, the keys are yours to this program. It's going to be fascinating to see how he handles it. I mean, we all think that he's more than ready for it from talent, maturity, all of that. But now it's really his. Dillon Gabriel is gone, and that's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. I'm excited to see the Arizona game got far more interesting today because of this and seeing what Jackson Arnold looks like with it being his show, his first start here in a few weeks.
Yeah, I think the timing of it all kind of works out very well for Oklahoma because obviously Jeff Levy leaves from Mississippi State. You promote Seth Luttrell, the offensive coordinator. Joe John Finley's co-offensive coordinator now. So while the offense isn't going to change too much, Seth Luttrell is going to start putting in his system, his flavors on it, as he said. And this next month for Jackson Arnold, he has an opportunity to take the reins of that offense, get comfortable within a system that is going to be a little bit different than what they've been doing, but still largely similar, get a feel for it. And, it's almost like a dress rehearsal for his, SEC debut next year. Mm-hmm. It's just a really good situation for him to be in, to have these, 15 practices to ramp up for that and prepare as the guy, because he hasn't had that opportunity yet. And even leading into the TCU game when he was getting most of the first team reps because Dillon was in concussion protocol, he still wasn't the guy because they still knew that if Dillon got cleared, they'd just throw him in there. But now this is going to be his team, his chance to really show why he was a top 10 player, a 5-star quarterback, and why Oklahoma has so much invested in his future.
And it's really just about Oklahoma giving him his chance now, because Dillon Gabriel, we see he's in the transfer portal, so he still wants to play college football. It's just like, you didn't really need to bring him back again. They just didn't need to. They want to get ready for the next era of guys. And Jackson Arnold, in the short time that we saw him this year, he looked like a guy that could be the number one guy on your team. So it was a pretty good run for Dillon Gabriel, but it's Jackson Arnold's time now. And I think everybody understood that. We asked Brent Venables about that a couple times throughout the season. I mean, I think we got the cryptic metrics from Tom. What he said, like it was, everything serves its time or something like that. Something very cryptic. Yeah. Everything has its time. Yeah. It's just like, I think they all understood what was going to happen. And, when Dillon Gabriel, during his presser after that last game, it seemed like he was saying a lot of things was over as well. I mean, his time in Oklahoma, he talked a lot about that. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, it seems kind of weird he's talking about all this right now because we still got a bowl game to go to, but that shows you why. I mean, he's in the transfer portal now, and they're letting Jackson Arnold take the reins. That's pretty awesome. And just by the way, we talked about Seth Luttrell getting that offensive job hire. Got to talk with him at the state championships last week. Seems like a really good guy. I mean, he's very excited about the opportunity. Got to talk to him and Joe Finley. So pretty good stuff coming from them, and they were watching some of the future Sooners during those state championships. So good for them.
Absolutely. All right, well, now let's speculate. Let's have some fun here. Call your shot. Where's Dillon Gabriel play next year? Obviously, there are some very obvious natural suitors. Mississippi State goes without saying. Jeff Levy's there. Those two guys are very close. I've had a connection for a long time. A huge part of why Dillon Gabriel came to Oklahoma in the first place was Jeff Levy. Obviously, that connection going back to UCF. So that's an obvious one. UCLA, maybe. He was obviously committed to UCLA for 2 seconds before flipping to Oklahoma once upon a time. So there was a time where Chip Kelly and UCLA was enticing enough for him to commit to it. They need a quarterback. Dante Moore, their guy in the portal there. That could make sense. Obviously, Oregon seems like one that could make a lot of sense. You saw what Bo Nix has done there. Dillon Gabriel, Marcus Mariota was a guy that he really idolized growing up. That seems like a very natural fit. And then the ugly one, the gross one that Oakland fans probably don't want to hear, but it makes sense on paper, is USC. Obviously, got to throw them in the mix too, because they need a quarterback desperately. And Lincoln Riley, that guy, say what you want about him, he's put a lot of QBs in the NFL. So what's your favorite here? Where do you think Gabriel ends up? What do you think makes the most sense? And where do we see him playing next year, in your guys' opinion?
Quack, quack. I think Oregon makes the most sense.
Me too.
Dillon Gabriel spent a lot of time this season talking about full circle moments. We talked about that with leading into the Texas game, heading into the UCF game, and just what this season meant to him and his career, and reuniting with Jeff Levy and all that. And I just think that the Marcus Mariota of it all, like, this is a guy that Dillon Gabriel idolized a lot of quarterbacks growing up in Hawaii. Colt Brennan's one we talked about a lot, but Marcus Mariota was that one who was playing when Dillon Gabriel was in middle school and high school. He saw him win a Heisman Trophy at Oregon. He saw him almost lead Oregon to a national title. And his family has a relationship with Marcus Mariota's family too. After Dillon led that game-winning touchdown drive against Texas, Dillon's mom gets a text from Alana Mariota saying, "Hey, savor this all, enjoy the ride." I just think it would be very fitting for Dillon Gabriel to finish his career at Oregon. Would fit very well in that offense. We saw what Bo Nix did this year. He'd be a Heisman favorite, maybe not a favorite, but certainly one of the front runners going into the season. Have a chance to compete for a national title, have a chance to put up prolific numbers, and just further cement his legacy as one of college football, college football's true college football quarterbacks. Just one of those dudes who's like, hey, remember him? He might not be an NFL star one day or anything like that, but he is one of those college football guys that, everybody just kind of looks back on and remembers 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, whatever it is. I think Oregon just makes a ton of sense for him on the West Coast, closer to home, all that. Yeah. So Oregon is my pick.
I like what Tom's saying here. I like Oregon as well, because I think of the best fits, as we talked about, I think of Oregon, Mississippi State, and UCLA, because he was already committed to UCLA at one point in time. Mississippi State because of the Jeff Levy connection. But I think of those three schools, Oregon is the place where he could win most games. And I think winning is a big part of what he wants to do. I mean, that's why he came to Oklahoma over UCLA, it seemed like at the beginning. He wants to win. He wants to be, next to Jeff Levy. So there's those kind of things play out. I mean, not to say that those other schools can't win, but I think Oregon's the best bet because they're pretty close this year. Almost got in. So, that's the situation I think that Dillon Gabriel wants to put himself in. He's going after the personal record. I mean, he wants to do winning as well. I mean, he still wants to get in one of those national, Final Four games. One of those. So that's a goal for him as well. Things like that. So that's where I would pick as Oregon. That's seems to make the most sense to me.
Cut the check, Phil Knight.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Clean sweep. I agree completely. I mean, you combine the dollars with the chance to win and get yourself to the NFL. Oregon checks those boxes more than the other ones do. Oregon's going to pay up. They got very much money over there, like Tom referenced with Phil Knight, that Nike connection. They have shown to be more than willing to play the NIL game. And you look what Dan Lanning and that team has done with Bo Nix, his renaissance. Obviously, Tom, very well, Bo Nix was not at all thought of as a guy like a Heisman NFL quarterback once upon a time at Auburn. He certainly is now after his time at Oregon. That could be the same situation for Dillon Gabriel. And then, like James said, chance to win. Oregon's they're not going anywhere. They're going to the Big Ten next year. So he's going to play in not the number one conference, but kind of the number 2 1A with the Big Ten. The new expanded Big Ten too, with all the Pac-12 teams added next year. It makes the most sense. Now, would it stun me if he goes to Mississippi State or UCLA or maybe something we haven't mentioned? No, it's college football, it's a transfer portal, but Oregon just seems to make too much sense not to do, basically. So we'll see. And obviously, I'm sure we'll bring it up and at least touch on it whenever he does make that decision, whatever, in the month of December. But that seems to be the obvious one. Certainly, I agree.
Now, if he is at Oregon State or something like that, I'm be surprised. Like
that would be something.
Yes, I don't know.
They have no quarterbacks, by the way. Oregon State's like lost all their quarterbacks. The transfer portal has been nuts today. Kyle McCord, Ohio State's quarterback, he hit the portal. It's wild times. We knew it would be wild times, and it's kind of exceeding expectations so far. We just started. The portal's been open for like 12 hours.
What's been the most surprising? Because that Kyle McCord is like, I mean, that's pretty surprising.
That's pretty high for me. I not that I'm plugged into the Ohio State beat, but that's surprising. Yeah. Also, the wide receiver out there, Fleming, hit the portal as well. It's kind of like, what's going on? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, they're in a good situation right now. It's weird the guys are leaving. So
the Kyle McCord one was kind of surprising, but also it's like a lot of the discussion around Ohio State this year was that they were really good in spite of Kyle McCord. Because it's just not like it's almost kind of like how a lot of Oklahoma fans like viewed Dillon Gabriel in a sense. Like they had such a high bar of quarterback play there in recent years that it's like you kind of step down to Kyle McCord. Now, Dillon Gabriel delivered much more, production and stability there than Kyle McCord did. But it's like, man, imagine how good Ohio State could have been if they had like the guy at quarterback this year.
Right.
But I still think that one was a little bit surprising.
Yeah, it was
who Ohio State picks up. They're going to be in the market, and you'd think they'd have their pick of the litter or pretty close to it. So that'll be exciting to see too.
It was some rough spots with Dillon Gabriel, but like I said, there was a lot of the offense was predicated on just how he performed because in the beginning of the season they didn't have that run game if they absolutely wanted, and it was up to Dillon Gabriel and those receivers to kind of make that offense work. So that's what I've always said. It was just so much on Dillon Gabriel because you didn't have the kicking game that you wanted either. So you really had to score touchdowns. It was a rough time, but they won 10 games with that. So that just shows you Dillon Gabriel is a special talent. So it's not somebody that you're just gonna just shake off. That's something that's gonna leave a hole here and there. Yeah,
absolutely. So elsewhere in the transfer portal for Oklahoma, and this will be a regular fixture on the show for the next several weeks. Obviously, kind of just a roundup of what else is happening. A few other guys hit the portal since our last show on Thursday. We talked about DJ Graham last week. Since we recorded, a few more guys have entered the portal. The big one being Tawee Walker, who we had kind of talked about before and speculated could be a possibility. That running back room is so crowded. Tawee Walker, a walk-on, who certainly has played his way into a scholarship somewhere. So that seemed to make a lot of sense. Also, I've had Nate Anderson, the offensive line, hit the portal. Jason Llewellyn, one of the reserve tight ends, has hit the portal. Obviously, the big one here, guys, is Tawee Walker. The running back room is crowded. You figured one or two of these guys is going to go because they all could be back if they want. Obviously, Javonte Barnes, Gavin Sawchuk, even Marcus Major has another year if he wants it. You felt like there was just no way they all were going to come back with the guys coming in, Xavier Robinson, Taylor Tatum. There was just a log jam. And so far, Tawee Walker, the one that has hit the portal, going to look for another team, just made a lot of sense because he's a walk-on, things like that. What has kind of stuck out to you guys from the early portal movement for Oklahoma? And keep in mind, too, we're recording this. It's 11:57 right now. By the time this show even ends or gets posted, there may be a couple more. But as of now, those are the ones we have. What's kind of stuck out so far in the early portal season here?
Yeah, the Tawee Walker decision, not totally surprising. I think he probably had the most to gain out of any of those guys leaving the running back room. Just because, again, he's a walk-on. He's got another year of eligibility. He's got a young child to help provide for. Some school is going to give him a scholarship opportunity. He's going to have an opportunity to make some NIL money too. And I think it's just, going to work out for him in the long run. I think it's going to work out for Oklahoma. He was, for large swaths of this season, he was their most consistent running back. But then he had that, in-house suspension and then just never really found his footing because, that kind of coincided with Gavin Sawchuk getting healthy and finding his form as a number one running back. So, there's no shortage of talent in that running back room for Oklahoma. They're going to be in good shape. Looks like Gavin Sawchuk is going to head into 2024 as the guy. We'll see how that shakes out, but I think this will work out for all parties involved, I think Tolly Walker is going to end up in a very good situation for himself and his family.
Yeah, Tyree was a big blow because of what he was able to do. Like I said in the article I wrote about him, he was like, he was always a guy that fell forward. You know, no matter what, he was falling forward and gaining yards whenever he ran the ball. He just had that spark. He was able to just, you know, hide behind the lineman and then shoot through the gaps and be able to get some yards after that. So he has that skill set. You know, it was just, he was already a walk-on. He had his issues with coaching staff, I guess, you know, in the practice and things like that. And, you know, that kind of brought him back a little bit. It brought him back, and then as soon as that happened, Gavin Sawchuk gets healthy and he starts being the guy. I mean, Gavin Sawchuk looked incredible since then. So it was like it was no really reason to go back to Tyree Walker. That's what it was. And you know, with Taylor Tatum coming in, the number one running back in the nation, you got, you know, Gavin Sawchuk, Marcus Majors, as you mentioned. I mean, all those guys can come back. It's like, where would he even be able to fit in? I mean, he's shown that he can be a scholarship back in a Power 5 team, because he did it. He did it for a couple of games there that really helped OU get over those bad games. So, I mean, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. When we first talked about it, that was the guy I was thinking, like, Tyree Walker may be the guy that can transfer, because he has the ability to do other things. So, I mean, it's a big blow to OU, but it makes sense. It makes sense. It doesn't seem like there's any ill will between the school and him. It's just he needs to move on.
Yeah, and they didn't have a scholarship to give in that running back room. So many guys, like we were just saying. And so that's kind of the one downside for Oklahoma, too, is that it's kind of a double whammy. Obviously, you lose a guy who was one of your better backs for pretty much the entire season, was your guy for a stretch there in the middle. He also doesn't clear up a scholarship because he wasn't on one. So that kind of stinks in that front. But the room is going to be fine. I think we all think that. I mean, they have so many options. The way Sawchuk came on, you figure you get Javonte Barnes healthy. With these other guys coming in, obviously Caleb Hicks and Dalen Smothers are just sitting there too. They didn't really get to even get used because there just was no need. They got options. They'll be okay, obviously. But, he earned it. He earned having an opportunity somewhere as a scholarship guy and probably as a number one option somewhere. So we'll see where he winds up and what his market looks like. You got to think that there will be more than a few teams and suitors for Tyree. So
I'm actually interested in what Marcus Major's going to do, because when we talked to him before the season, his goal was to be available for the team because he's had so many injury-stricken seasons. His main goal was just to be available for the team and be able to be used in the games, you know. And the first half of the year, he was able to do that. You know, he had that shoulder injury, and it's been like you haven't really seen him much since then. So want to see if he's trying to make a comeback, try to accomplish that goal once again, or is he going to try to do it elsewhere? But I want to see. I mean, he's an Oklahoma guy, so he's from Millwood, Oklahoma. So I mean, he's a guy that's you really want to pay attention to and stuff like that. So I want to see what he's going to do.
I think it's pretty telling that he went through senior day festivities before the TCU game. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him move on and try to find another opportunity elsewhere, especially with just the logjam of talent they have in that running back room heading into next year. But we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about that a lot over December, and obviously as spring gets closer to kind of the hierarchy there. As it looks like Sawchuk, I mean, the way he finished the year, you figure he's your guy. But what does it look like after him? Because the options are aplenty, and we'll have obviously a lot of time to talk about that going into spring and then next season. So to finish up here, obviously, like I just said off the top, the NY6 is announced. We talked about it last Thursday. Oklahoma, their placement in the rankings was not going to deliver them a NY6 game at number 12. But as Tom very smartly brought up last week on the show, there was some potential for Oklahoma to move up because SMU Tulane in that American Championship game. If SMU wins, they move into the top 25. They get Oklahoma another ranked win. Ole Miss loses a ranked win. It's a double whammy with that SMU Tulane switch. We thought maybe that could be enough to lift Oklahoma to that 11 spot and get them in a NY6 game. No, didn't happen. SMU won the game, but the ranking movement didn't happen. Oklahoma stayed at 12. They're still behind Penn State and Ole Miss. I don't need to rehash everything I said last week, but it makes no sense to me. Oklahoma has got the best win by far of that group over Texas. They're the only ones that have 2 team wins over ranked teams right now. Currently ranked teams, Penn State and Ole Miss, only have 1 piece. And like I said, it's nowhere near to the level of that Texas win, which was at a neutral site. And so we're going to the Alamo Bowl, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. Obviously, we'll have a lot of time to preview the game, but guys, your reaction, I guess, whenever those rankings came out and Oklahoma was still at 12, I expected it, but it still was puzzling to me because it just, when you look at the resumes, there just is not a strong argument to me, and it's all subjective, but to me, that Oklahoma should be behind Ole Miss and Penn State. I frankly, they should be ahead of both of them. They should be number 10, in my opinion. Where you guys kind of stand here. It doesn't matter now. Obviously, it's done, but it doesn't feel great. It feels like Oklahoma maybe got hosed a little bit here.
Yeah, I was a little surprised, especially like waking up Sunday morning and you saw the tide start to shift. A lot of the projections were coming in for, hey, maybe Oklahoma's going to be headed to the Cotton Bowl. Saw that against Ohio State as a very popular destination there. It's like, okay, maybe that SMU win paired with Texas, beating Oklahoma State and probably cementing its spot in the playoff was going to be enough to strengthen Oklahoma's resume. And even though SMU moved into the rankings, even though Tulane fell out, it wasn't enough to bump Oklahoma up a spot. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise because the committee didn't change those 4 2-loss teams.
Did they even reevaluate it?
Yeah.
Like, did they even look at it? That's how it feels to me. They didn't even look at it.
Well, you could say that about a lot of their decision making.
Yeah,
because
rough weekend.
There's just a lack of consistency in their reasoning from top to bottom when doing all this. So it's a little surprising, but I think Oklahoma definitely has a gripe. It's water under the bridge at this point. It is what it is. You're going to play in the Alamo Bowl. Oklahoma is certainly not the top team to have something to grieve over right now because Florida State absolutely got hosed. But I mean, I woke up Sunday morning thinking that we were going to be covering a New Year's Six Bowl just because of the way things kind of played out on Saturday. So I was a little bit surprised when 1:30 rolled around after 3 hours of everybody talking about the top 4 that Oklahoma did not appear in one of those New Year's Six games. And equally surprising, I was surprised that Liberty got in. I really thought that SMU was going to be able to move ahead and be the top-ranked Group of 5 team there. And maybe if SMU did, then Oklahoma would have been playing a New Year's Six game too. But it's I don't know, it's a little crazy to me. Between the playoff and the New Year's Six, you have 4 SEC teams in there. Alabama, Georgia going to the Orange Bowl, Mizzou,
Cotton. Missouri's in the Cotton.
Yeah.
It's peach.
And it's the distribution of wealth, so to speak, just comes off a little weird to me, especially when the committee kind of sneaks Alabama in there ahead of Florida State as the number 4 seed. It is what it is, as others have pointed out. I don't think Oklahoma's going to have to worry about getting short shrift with bowl games and stuff starting next year when it goes to the SEC. But yeah, it's a little bit of a surprise to me.
It was puzzling. It was very puzzling, and it was strange. As Josh put out the tweet and everything, and I said, "Hey, it's strange. This is strange stuff that's happening." Now, when you look at it, you know that Oklahoma's going to the SEC because of money and things like that. But there's also this glaring issue right here, as Tom just said. The SEC is all over the final teams in there. That's another big reason. It's like the committee does not respect the Big 12. OU's either had to be undefeated or one loss to even get a a chance in the Final Four. Usually like the 4th team in and things like that. It's just they need to move the SEC because of this. There's a bias. I mean, let's just be honest. There's a bias there from the committee. They like those teams. When you look at the resume of these 4 teams that that we're being considered: Oklahoma, Penn State, Ole Miss, and Missouri. Oklahoma and Missouri were the 2 that actually had 2 ranked wins over opponents. Others only had 1. Oklahoma had the most wins over bowl eligible teams in that scenario, and but it was all about the worst losses. As we pointed out, and it's because OU played Kansas and OSU that their losses were worse than Georgia, LSU, things like that. The teams lost to. So that was weird. I think they're gauging it more on who they lost to than who they beat. And if you look at it, OU beat the better caliber teams on their schedule than the other 3 did. It's puzzling. It's puzzling.
Yeah.
Honestly,
it's okay because they did that to Alabama too. They looked at Alabama losing to Texas instead of Florida State beating literally everybody on their schedule, including 2 SEC teams.
Yeah,
so,
it's like Big Ten and SEC. That's why the move had to happen. I know it's a little scary, but it had to happen. And I think OU is set to be in a good situation. We talked about the running back room, the depth that they have. We already know about the receivers. All those guys are bringing back. You got Jackson Arnold coming in. You got the 5-star defensive lineman coming in. You got the 5-star safety as it is right now. OU is going to be really very prepared for this move as well. So it's not like they're going to drop off. They should be just fine.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy too to me, with Penn State and Ole Miss specifically, I'm not going to argue Missouri too much. That doesn't bother me. Penn State and Ole Miss are the ones that bother me. And those two teams, while those two losses were better in quotes, obviously Penn State lost to Ohio State and Michigan, Ole Miss lost to Georgia and Alabama. Those 4 games, were not competitive. They were not competitive at all. Those two teams do not belong on the field with elite competition. We saw Oklahoma against elite competition. Texas, guess what happened? They beat them on a neutral field. So it just makes no sense to me. Also, it's been way overstated how bad Oklahoma's losses were. Those are not bad losses. I mean, Oklahoma should have won those games. Were they favorite? Sure. But on the road, 1-score games, 8 total points to Kansas, who won 8 games and would have won more if they didn't lose their backup quarterback. They were on their 3rd string at the end of the year. And Oklahoma State was playing for a conference title at the end of the year. Well, those are not just horrible, unforgivable losses. So
and both came down to the last drive.
What's that?
And both came down to the last drive.
Yeah, right. Easily could have won them. Yeah.
Whereas, you look at Penn State, I think it was the Michigan game. Penn State was up 3-0 early, but never.
Yeah, that was it. That was it.
Yeah, even though they lost those games by 9 and 10 points to Michigan and Ohio State, they were never really in it when you watch those games. So it is a little puzzling. I think, like I said, I think Oklahoma does have something to gripe about, but I mean, at the end of the day, it is what it is.
Well, like we said, the saving grace here, frankly, if you're Oklahoma, is that this isn't a year from now, because this would have been the difference between Oklahoma making the playoff and not making it if this was a year from now. So, I mean, just the faith in the committee is very low. And obviously, it's been a major talking point. We've kind of touched on it. Florida State getting left out of the playoff in favor of Alabama.
That's crazy, man.
But they didn't apply that same logic when it was talking about Liberty and SMU. It's basically the exact same situation. SMU played a much tougher schedule. Liberty didn't play anybody. Liberty had the worst strength of schedule in the country, but they got rewarded just for being undefeated, just for the sake of being undefeated. But they did not apply that exact same logic to Florida State and Alabama at the top when turning the playoff. And so the inconsistency all over the place is just maddening. And that's why the expanded playoff is necessary, because while the committee is still going to mess things up and they're still going to enrage us, more teams in the playoff limits how much they can. Florida State would still be in the expanded playoff. They'd still be getting hosed, obviously. They would be having to play an extra game, but they would still be in. You know what I mean? Teams who really deserve it will still be in for the most part. And that's why the expanded playoff will limit some of this, but it's not going to fix it all because the committee stinks, frankly. And so it is what
they said that. I mean, Florida State, they said that the way they're constructed right now, they're not able to beat any of those 4 teams, but for some reason they're ahead of Georgia.
Exactly.
You think they're going to beat Georgia?
Like 11 then? By that.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of teams on there that they wouldn't beat if you go off of that. But you also can't. It's hard to play the if game in that situation. You can't just say if this, if that. I mean, they have the resume. You go off of what the resume is. They did what they were supposed to do to get in. They should be awarded for that, no matter who's starting quarterback. Ohio State had their 3rd string win them a championship one year.
Yeah,
I mean, you look at the NFL. I mean, Carson Wentz went down. I mean, who came in and won the Super Bowl? Nick Foles. I mean, stuff like that can happen. I mean, you gotta give them a chance. They earned the spot to be in. You gotta give them a chance. And I don't know. They didn't seem to look at a lot of resumes in this one. I think they did the same thing with OU. It's crazy stuff, man.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you look at it like, let's say Alabama had lost to Georgia. Florida State's still the odd team out in that scenario then, because they're not going to leave Georgia out. So it's almost like it felt like the committee pre-decided that they're going to dock Florida State because their starting quarterback got hurt. And Florida State certainly did not look like it did earlier in the season without Jordan Travis, but it still went on the road against an SEC team and a rival and won that game, and then beat a team that the committee saw as a top 15 team in a neutral site in bad weather by double digits, by just absolutely suffocating them defensively. I mean, at some point, defense is a part of football too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just about the quarterback. Florida State should be absolutely livid and disgusted. But if I'm them and I find a way to beat Georgia in the Orange Bowl somehow, I'm claiming a national title, man. I don't care.
Yeah.
You go 14-0 and you beat the team that won back-to-back titles and won 29 of its last 30 games. You claim a national title, man. I don't care. Do it.
No, and they probably will, and I won't fight them on it. That's for sure. Wild stuff. The committee, not good. And Oklahoma should be a New Year's 6 game, but they're not. And so we're going to San Antonio. We're going to see Oklahoma play Arizona on December 28th. Obviously, the game is 3.5 weeks away. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about this game and actually preview it and really break it down. But I guess just initial thoughts here. I mean, things that jump out. I mean, there is kind of some fun Seth Luttrell connections here, obviously. The fact his first game is going to be against Arizona. And Arizona's a good team, which is not – I mean, Arizona's piping hot. I mean, I think most people realize that. But Arizona in the second half of the year was throttling teams, and beating good teams week after week after week from the middle of the season on. They got off to a bit of a rough start. But the second half of the year, they were as good as anybody. Not a team you really want to play, frankly, right now. Oklahoma will be with Jackson Arnold, which adds intrigue, but certainly makes it tougher. The kid making his first start. Some early thoughts here. What jumps out? I mean, it should be entertaining. It's disappointing a little bit that we're not in a big game, quote unquote, New Year's 6 game. Sure, I covered this game 2 years ago. Alamo Bowl does a great job. San Antonio's a great city. We'll all make the most of it. But it'll be interesting. Oklahoma and Arizona here in 3.5 weeks from now.
Real quick, before we switch over, I'll let Tom go first. But I want to say, I mean, I know Josh said before the season, they're not going to let a one-loss Big 12 team champion not get in. I think when that happened, they saw that Alabama had just won the SEC and they're a one-loss team and they won the SEC. It was going to be very hard to keep them out. And I think once they did it, they said, let's put Alabama in there. Like, oh, but they lost to Texas too. Okay, let's put them in there with Texas as well. FSU has to stay out. I think that kind of was the reasoning behind it as well. I know we're talking about a different subject now, but I want to throw it out there just for another aspect of it. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, no, I think it should be an interesting game. I mean, you got 2 top 15 teams. Obviously, the Jackson Arnold situation, adds a little bit more intrigue for Oklahoma. Arizona's been playing great. As you pointed out, the second half of the year, they haven't lost since that triple overtime game against USC, which I think was the same weekend as Red River, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And Arizona probably should.
I was too tired. I wanted to watch Denver. Yeah.
Arizona probably should have won that game. Probably should have gone for 2 before they had to, because you don't want to give Caleb Williams an additional chance to get the ball in his hands. But Jedfish has turned that program around in a short time. Think it's going to be a really interesting matchup. We'll dive into it more in the coming weeks. But like you said, interesting Seth Luttrell tie-in. Last time Arizona played in the Alamo Bowl, that was the year that Seth Luttrell and Bill Bedenbaugh were co-offensive coordinators. Mm-hmm. But yeah, an interesting matchup. Like as far as like non-New Year's 6 bowls, this is on paper should be one of the better bowl games this season
for sure.
Mm-hmm. And when you hear the names, it doesn't really light a fire until you actually look at what these 2 teams have done this year. I know, as we talked about, Arizona's been improving as the season has gone on, and that's a very dangerous team to play against. They really have nothing to lose in that situation. They're improving, and they're trying to get their name into where Oklahoma's name is, things like that. So that's a dangerous team to play. The good thing with OU, as we talked about, Jackson Arnold's going to be there. Most of the guys I feel like would still stay in this game and play. I think the offensive line is going to be the biggest question. How's that going to shape out? Is Walter Rouse going to play? Things like that, because some of those guys are getting ready for the NFL and things like that. But it should be an interesting game. It's not going to be something that's just a blow-off game that nobody's going to watch. It should be pretty interesting, is because we said Arizona is going forward, and OU wants to see how are they going to look next year. You got a new offensive coordinator, things like that. How are they going to call plays? How are they going to handle difficult situations? All that's kind of exciting in this situation.
8:15 local kick in San Antonio. It's the exact antithesis of the BYU game where Tom and I had 10 a.m. Local. 8:15, so late night in San Antonio coming up in a few weeks. And like we said, we'll have plenty of time to actually break down this game and kind of talk about more what Arizona brings to the table and all that stuff. But there's some interesting elements to it. It's a top 15 matchup, and so we'll look forward to it. The Mike Stoops Bowl. It'll be fun to see here in a few weeks down in San Antonio. All right, I think that's it for now. Obviously, we'll be back on Thursday. Special deal running right now. Want to make sure we get it in. 60% off. I think it's for a year. I want to double check that on the deal whenever you sign up. But 60% off, I believe, for transfer portal. Kind of a special deal right now running through Wednesday. Now's the best time. Colin's crushing on the transfer portal side of things. We have more VIP content, obviously, on the site as well. Oklahoma.247sports.com. Be sure to get over there. Become part of the party. December is going to be nuts. And then we got the bowl game coming up. Hoops is off and running. The men's team just moved up to 19 in the AP poll a little bit ago. On the rise. Going to be a fun team to keep up with on that front, too. Women obviously playing well. Be Diamond Sports before you know it. So jump aboard. Become part of the family on Sooners Illustrated here over the next in December and beyond. So it's going to be fun. All right, that's it for now. We'll be back on Thursday. Talk about the latest in transfer portal, all the other news that happens between now and then. For Tom Green, James E. Jackson, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys Thursday for the next edition of the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.